The scent of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air as Juliet Calloway wiped down the counter of the Moonlit Brew for the 5th time that evening. The quaint cafe nestled in the heart of Boston's historic district had been unusually quiet, allowing her mind to wander to her mounting bills and her mother's worsening condition at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. "Just another hour," she murmured to herself, glancing at the antique clock on the wall. Rain pattered against the windows, creating rivulets that distorted the view of the empty street outside. The bell above the door chimed, startling her from her thoughts. A tall figure stepped inside, water dripping from a long black coat that seemed more suited to another century than this one. As he lowered his hood, Juliet caught her breath. His face was striking, all sharp angles and pale alabaster skin that seemed to glow under the warm lights of the cafe. His eyes, dark as midnight, scanned the room before settling on her with an intensity that made her fingers tighten around the cloth in her hand. "We are closing soon," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I require only a moment of shelter from the storm," he replied, his voice carrying a faint accent she could not place, something old-world and refined that seemed to belong in ancient halls rather than her modest cafe. Juliet nodded, gesturing toward an empty table. "One coffee before closing?" The stranger's mouth curved slightly. "That would be acceptable." As she prepared his drink, she felt his eyes following her movements. There was something about him that seemed out of time, as if he had stepped from the pages of a forgotten history book. His stillness was unnatural, she realized. He did not fidget or check his phone like other customers. He simply watched, patient as stone. "Here you are," she said, placing the cup before him. "One Americano." "My thanks." He did not drink it, merely wrapped long, elegant fingers around the ceramic. "You work late hours alone." It was not a question, but Juliet answered anyway. "I need the money. Medical bills." Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps. "A noble cause. For yourself." "My mother." Juliet did not know why she was telling him this. "Cancer. The treatments are expensive, and the insurance only covers so much." The stranger's gaze intensified. "And yet you smile for your customers. You create this." He gestured to the cafe with its mismatched furniture and hand-painted mugs. "Sanctuary for others while bearing such a burden." Juliet shrugged, uncomfortable with his assessment. "It is what it is. We all have our crosses to bear." "Indeed." His fingers tapped once against the cup. "Some for centuries longer than others." Before she could question his strange comment, the lights flickered, then went out completely. The storm had knocked out the power. Juliet sighed, reaching beneath the counter for the emergency flashlight. "I guess that is my cue to close early," she said, the beam illuminating the stranger's face. For a moment, just a heartbeat, she thought his eyes reflected the light like a cat's. But when she blinked, they were normal again. "Allow me to compensate you for the inconvenience," he said, placing several crisp $100 bills on the table. Juliet's eyes widened. "I cannot accept that for a single coffee. Consider it a donation to your mother's care." He rose in one fluid motion. "My name is Alexander Dracul. I have recently acquired property in the area. I find myself interested in your establishment." "Mr. Dracul?" "Alexander, please." "Alexander, this is too much." His smile did not reach his eyes. "I have more wealth than time to spend it, miss." "Juliet. Juliet Calloway." "Miss Calloway." He inclined his head in a gesture that seemed more suited to courts than cafes. "I will return tomorrow evening. Perhaps we might discuss how else I might be of assistance." Before she could protest further, he was gone, slipping into the night so quickly she almost wondered if she had imagined him. Only the money on the table confirmed he had been real. Alexander Dracul strode through the rainy streets, his senses alert to the night around him. For centuries of existence had taught him to be cautious, yet something about the human woman had compelled him to linger, to speak more than necessary. Her scent, beneath the coffee and cinnamon, had called to him. Old blood, rare blood. blood that sang of ancient lineage she herself likely knew nothing about. He reached the renovated Victorian mansion on the hill that overlooked the city, pushing open the ornate gates with a thought. As lord of the New England vampire court, he had properties across the region, but this one had become his primary residence since the incident with his mother. "Any change?" he asked the servant who opened the door. "None, my lord. The Lady Elisabetta remains as before." Alexander's jaw tightened. His mother, once the most powerful vampire queen of Eastern Europe, now lay in a torpid state, her immortal body withering from the hunter's poison that should have been impossible to create. The human doctor they had compelled to examine her could find no cause, no cure. The poison was ancient, lost to time, or so he had believed. He entered the chamber where she rested. In the candlelight, her once beautiful face appeared sunken, gray veins visible beneath translucent skin. For months since the attack, and she showed no signs of recovery. The hunters had grown bold, knowledgeable. They had targeted his mother specifically, knowing she was the keeper of the old ways, the ancient blood rituals that bound their kind together. "I will find a cure," he promised, kneeling beside her bed. "I will make them pay." As he spoke the words, his mind returned unbidden to the barista with her warm eyes and the scent of old blood. There was something about her that called to him, something beyond mere hunger. And for the first time in centuries, Alexander felt a stirring of something that resembled hope. Monsters like him did not deserve hope. He had learned that lesson painfully over his long existence. Monsters deserved solitude, penance for the lives they had taken. But if her blood was what he suspected, if she carried the bloodline of the healers of old, she might be the key to saving his mother. And that meant Juliet Calloway had just become the most important human in his world. Juliet arrived at the hospital early the next morning, clutching the envelope containing Alexander's money. She had debated all night whether to use it, but in the end, her mother's needs outweighed her pride. "Morning sunshine," her mother said weakly as Juliet entered the room. Margaret Calloway had once been vibrant and strong, her hands calloused from decades of gardening and her skin tanned from hours in the sun. Now she was pale and thin, her once abundant red hair reduced to sparse wisps from the treatments. "I brought you something," Juliet said, pulling out a thermos. "Real coffee, not the swill they serve here." Her mother smiled, reaching for it with trembling hands. "My hero, how was work last night?" Juliet hesitated. "Interesting, actually. I met someone strange." "Strange good or strange bad?" her mother asked, sipping the coffee. "I am not sure yet." Juliet sat on the edge of the bed. "He left this." She pulled out one of the $100 bills. Her mother's eyes widened. "Juliet, I know. Do not take money from strangers. But Mom, it would cover the new treatment Dr. Reynolds mentioned. The one insurance will not approve." Margaret frowned, her face suddenly serious. "There is something more important we need to discuss. I have been having the dreams again." Juliet stiffened. Her mother's dreams had been a point of contention throughout her childhood. Vivid nightmares of creatures with fangs and pale skin, of ancient rituals and blood sacrifices. As a child, Juliet had believed them to be real. As an adult, she recognized them as manifestations of her mother's mental health struggles that had preceded the cancer. "Mom, you are just stressed. The medication—" "No." Margaret gripped her wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me. The shadows are moving again. They know about you now." "Know what about me?" "About your blood. Our blood." Margaret's eyes were fever-bright. "We are not like others, Juliet. We never have been. Our family has a purpose." Juliet gently extracted her hand. "Mom, please. Not today." Margaret slumped back against the pillows. "You will see soon enough. They are coming. The Night Walkers. And they will need you, just as they have needed our family for generations." Before Juliet could respond, a nurse entered with medication. Grateful for the interruption, Juliet excused herself to speak with the billing department about the new treatment. By the time she returned, her mother was asleep, the conversation about night walkers mercifully forgotten. That evening, Alexander returned to the Moonlit Brew precisely at closing time. Juliet had been watching for him, both dreading and anticipating his arrival. He wore a dark suit this time, the fabric clearly expensive, with a crimson tie that made his pale skin seem even more striking by contrast. "Miss Calloway," he greeted her, inclining his head. "Mr. Dracul." She gestured to a table she had prepared with 2 cups of coffee. "I assumed you would return." He smiled, a genuine one this time that transformed his severe features into something almost beautiful. "Am I so predictable?" "No," she admitted, sitting across from him. "But you strike me as a man who keeps his word, a quality that has served me well through the years." He took the seat opposite her but did not touch the coffee. "Were you able to put my contribution to good use?" Juliet nodded, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "Yes, my mother will begin a new treatment next week. I cannot thank you enough, but I also cannot accept charity. I need to understand why you would help a stranger." Alexander's dark eyes studied her face. "Perhaps I see something in you that reminds me of someone. Perhaps I simply have wealth to spare and enjoy the coffee you brew. Does my motivation matter if the outcome benefits your mother?" "It matters to me," Juliet said firmly. "I do not like being indebted to anyone, especially someone I just met." "Admirable." He leaned forward slightly. "What if I were to offer you employment? Additional employment, that is. I require assistance of a specialized nature." Juliet raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." For the first time, Alexander laughed, a rich, deep sound that seemed rusty from disuse. "Nothing untoward, I assure you. My mother is ill. The doctors have been unable to help her. I believe in exploring all options, including some that modern medicine might consider unconventional." "I am not a doctor or a nurse," Juliet pointed out. "No, but you have compassion, and sometimes that is more valuable than medical knowledge." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "There is also the matter of your bloodline." Juliet froze. "My what?" "Your ancestry. Your mother's maiden name is Viduva, is it not?" "How could you possibly know that?" Juliet's heart hammered in her chest. "I make it my business to know things about people who interest me." Alexander's expression became unreadable. "The Viduva line is ancient, Miss Calloway. In my culture, it is associated with healing abilities. Abilities that might help my mother where modern medicine has failed." Juliet's mind raced back to her mother's fevered words about their blood being special. About night walkers coming. "This is crazy," she muttered. "Is it?" Alexander reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of touching hers. "Have you never experienced moments of inexplicable knowing? Have cuts never healed too quickly under your touch? Has your blood never seemed to call to creatures of the night?" Juliet jerked back as if burned. "Who are you? Really?" Alexander stood, buttoning his jacket with deliberate calm. "Someone who needs your help. Someone who can offer you more money than you could earn in a decade at this cafe, money that could save your mother's life." He placed a business card on the table. "Come to this address tomorrow night if you wish to learn more. If not, I will trouble you no further." He left before she could respond, the bell above the door chiming softly in his wake. With trembling fingers, Juliet picked up the card. Embossed in elegant script was an address in Beacon Hill, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Boston, and a simple line, "The truth awaits, daughter of the Viduva line." Asterisk against every rational instinct, Juliet found herself climbing the steps to the massive Victorian mansion the following evening. Her conversation with her mother that morning had sealed her decision. "He knew about the Viduva name," Juliet had told her. "He said our blood was special." Margaret had grabbed her hand, eyes suddenly clear and focused. "You must go to him. It is beginning just as my mother foretold. The covenant will be renewed." "What covenant?" Juliet had asked, but her mother had merely smiled cryptically. "You will know when the time comes. Trust your blood, Juliet. It remembers even if you do not. Now, standing before the ornate door with its intricate carvings of flowers and vines, Juliet wondered if she had lost her mind. She raised her hand to knock, but the door swung open before her knuckles could make contact. A tall, austere woman with silver-streaked black hair stood in the entrance. "Miss Calloway," she said, her accent similar to Alexander's. "The master is expecting you." Juliet followed her through a grand foyer and up a sweeping staircase. Oil paintings lined the walls, their subjects dressed in clothing from different historical periods. She could have sworn one portrait, of a severe-looking woman in Renaissance attire, had Alexander's eyes. The housekeeper led her to a library where a fire crackled in a massive stone hearth. Alexander stood before it, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. "You came," he said without turning. "I am pleased." "I came for answers," Juliet replied, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "No more cryptic comments about my bloodline or my mother's maiden name. I want the truth." Alexander turned, his face solemn in the firelight. "The truth is rarely simple, Miss Calloway, but you deserve it nonetheless." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. What I have to tell you may be difficult to accept." Juliet remained standing. "Try me." A smile flickered across his lips. "Very well. I am a vampire, Miss Calloway. I have walked this earth for 426 years. My mother, Alexander Dracul, has existed for nearly 8 centuries. She was poisoned 4 months ago by vampire hunters using an ancient toxin thought lost to time. A toxin that can only be neutralized by the blood of a Veduva healer." Juliet stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, she laughed a short, sharp sound. "Right? And I am the Tooth Fairy. Your skepticism is understandable." Alexander moved with inhuman speed, suddenly standing directly before her. "But your blood knows the truth, calls to my kind. It always has." Juliet stepped back, her heart racing. "This is insane." "Is it?" Alexander's eyes suddenly glowed crimson, and when he spoke again, she saw the elongated canines. "Your ancestors made a pact with mine centuries ago. Veduva blood for vampiric protection. A covenant as old as the forests of Romania." Juliet's mind raced back to her mother's ramblings, to the nightmares that had plagued her own childhood, visions of pale beings drinking from ornate chalices, of blood freely given under moonlight. "If vampires are real," she said slowly, "why have I never seen one before?" "Because we do not wish to be seen." Alexander's features returned to normal. "We exist in the shadows of your world, Miss Calloway. We adapt. We survive. And sometimes, we require help from those bloodlines that have always known of our existence." Juliet sank onto the chair, her legs suddenly weak. "My mother knew. All those years, I thought she was having delusions. She was trying to prepare you." Alexander's voice softened. "The Veduva women have always been keepers of the old knowledge. Healers who understood that not all monsters are evil, and not all humans are good." "And you want my blood to heal your mother?" Alexander nodded. "A small amount, freely given in a ritual as old as our kind's alliance. I would never take it by force, the covenant forbids it. But without it, my mother will fade away, and the balance between our worlds will shift. The hunters who poisoned her will target other vampire elders, and eventually, they will come for the Veduva line as well. Why would they come for humans like us? Because your blood can heal us. And those who wish to eradicate vampires would eliminate any who might aid us." Alexander knelt before her chair, his eyes level with hers. "I can protect you and your mother, Juliet. I can ensure she receives the best medical care in the world. But I need your help first." Juliet studied his face, the ancient eyes in the young face, the burden of centuries visible in their depths. "Show me your mother," she said finally. "Then I will decide." The chamber was dimly lit with dozens of candles, their flickering light casting dancing shadows on the walls. On a massive 4-poster bed lay a woman who appeared both ancient and ageless, her features fine and aristocratic, her skin like parchment stretched over bone. "This is Alexander Dracul," Alexander said softly. Once the most powerful vampire queen of Eastern Europe. Now reduced to this state by a poison created specifically to destroy our kind. Juliet approached the bed cautiously. Despite her unconscious state, there was something regal about the woman. Something that commanded respect even in her weakened condition. What exactly would I need to do? Juliet asked, her voice hushed in the quiet room. The ritual is simple. 3 drops of your blood, freely given, mixed with sacred herbs in water from the Carpathian Mountains. The mixture must be administered at midnight during the new moon. Alexander's face was solemn. Which happens to be tonight. Juliet's eyes narrowed. Convenient timing. Not convenience. Fate. Alexander moved to a small table where an ornate silver bowl and dagger rested. The Veduva blood called to me. It led me to your cafe, to you. The universe conspires toward balance. Juliet. Our meeting was not chance. Juliet approached the table, examining the intricate engravings on the bowl, symbols she recognized from her mother's sketchbooks, drawings Margaret had claimed came from her dreams. My mother said something about a covenant being renewed, Juliet murmured. Alexander nodded. The alliance between our families is ancient but must be actively maintained. Each generation of Veduva women traditionally acknowledges the bond. Your grandmother did so. Your mother would have, had she not left Romania before her time came. And now it falls to me. Juliet looked from the dagger to the unconscious vampire queen. If I do this, if I help heal your mother, what exactly am I committing to? Alexander's gaze was intense. You acknowledge the bond between our bloodlines. You accept my protection for you and your mother. And you recognize that your blood holds power that comes with responsibility. What happens if I refuse? A shadow crossed Alexander's face. My mother will eventually succumb to the poison. The balance between our kinds will deteriorate. The hunters will grow bolder. He paused. And you will remain unprotected from those who would see the Veduva line extinguished. Juliet took a deep breath, thinking of her mother in the hospital, of the strange dreams that had plagued both of them, of the sense she had always had that she was meant for something beyond her ordinary life. I need to know one thing first, she said firmly. Do you drink human blood? Do you kill? I am a vampire, Juliet. Blood is our sustenance. Alexander's expression was unreadable. But I have not taken a human life in over 2 centuries. We have evolved. Blood banks, willing donors, animal blood in times of necessity. We are not the monsters of your films. Juliet nodded slowly. Midnight, you said? Alexander glanced at an antique clock on the wall. We have 20 minutes. Juliet took the dagger, its weight solid in her hand. Show me what to do. The ritual was simpler than Juliet had expected. As the clock struck midnight, she allowed Alexander to guide her hand over the silver bowl. The dagger's edge, sharper than seemed possible, sliced cleanly across her palm. 3 drops of blood fell into the mixture of clear mountain water and herbs that smelled of earth and ancient forests. As her blood touched the liquid, it turned from clear to crimson, then to a deep, rich purple that seemed to glow from within. The mark of true Veduva blood, Alexander murmured, his voice tinged with awe. It recognizes the covenant. Alexander carefully lifted his mother's head, bringing the bowl to her colorless lips. As the liquid touched her mouth, a visible shudder ran through Elisabetta's body. Alexander recited words in a language Juliet did not recognize. Something older than Latin, more primal. The candles around them suddenly flared brighter, and Juliet felt a strange pulling sensation in her chest, as if an invisible thread connected her heart to the vampire queen. For a moment, the room seemed to fade away, replaced by visions of forests bathed in moonlight, of ancient stone circles where pale figures and humans in ceremonial robes stood together in solemn ritual. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation faded. Elisabetta's eyes snapped open dark, fathomless eyes that fixed immediately on Juliet. Veduva, she whispered, her voice like dry leaves rustling. After all these years, Alexander made a sound that might have been a sob from a less controlled being. Mother, he said, taking her hand. Elisabetta's gaze remained on Juliet. You have honored the ancient bond, daughter of healers. The covenant is renewed. Juliet felt lightheaded, the room spinning slightly around her. I need to sit down. Alexander was at her side instantly, supporting her as her knees buckled. The ritual takes much energy from the healer, he explained, guiding her to a chair. It will pass. Alexander, Elisabetta said, her voice already stronger. You must complete the bond. She is weakened. Alexander's body tensed. Mother, she has given enough tonight. The covenant requires balance. Blood given must be replenished with strength. Elisabetta struggled to sit up. The old ways must be honored, my son, or the healing will not take full effect. Juliet looked between them, confusion clear on her face. What is she talking about? Alexander's jaw tightened. In the traditional ritual, after the Veduva blood heals the vampire provides strength to the healer through a small exchange of blood. It replenishes what was lost and strengthens the bond between our kinds. His eyes met Juliet's. But I would not ask this of you. You have already done more than enough. Elisabetta made a sound of disapproval. The ritual is incomplete. The balance disturbed. The consequences? I will bear them, mother, Alexander interrupted. Times have changed. The old ways must adapt. Juliet studied his face, the conflict evident in his expression. The concern for her well-being warring with respect for tradition. In that moment, she saw not a monster but a being caught between worlds, trying to do what was right. What would it entail? She asked quietly. Alexander's surprise was evident. Juliet, you do not need to. I want to understand. She held his gaze steadily. If this covenant has protected my family for generations, I should know exactly what it means. Alexander hesitated before explaining. A small amount of my blood would be given to you, just a few drops mixed with wine. It would restore your energy and create a connection between us. I would sense if you were in danger, and you would heal more quickly from injuries. Would it make me like you? No. The transformation requires a complete blood exchange and the draining of human life force. This is merely a strengthening of your natural abilities. Juliet considered this, the rational part of her mind screaming that this was madness, that vampires could not possibly exist, that she should run from this room and never look back. But another part, the part that recognized the symbols on the bowl, that had always known her mother's delusions held truth, understood that she had already crossed a threshold from which there was no return. If I refuse, will your mother's healing be compromised? Alexander's hesitation told her everything. It would be less complete. The poison might linger, causing weakness. Juliet straightened her shoulders. Then I will complete the ritual. But I need your word that this creates no obligation beyond what we have already discussed. You have it, Alexander said solemnly. This is about balance, not bondage. Elisabetta watched them with ancient eyes that seemed to see more than the present moment. Prepare the chalice, she commanded softly. Alexander moved to a cabinet, removing a silver goblet and a bottle of deep red wine. He poured the wine carefully, then used the same dagger that had cut Juliet to make a small incision on his wrist. 3 drops of his blood, darker than human blood, almost black, fell into the wine. He brought the chalice to Juliet, kneeling before her chair. Drink only if you are certain, he said quietly. Once done, it cannot be undone. Juliet took the goblet, looking into the swirling red liquid where Alexander's blood had created strange, shimmering patterns like constellations. To the covenant, she said softly, and drank. The wine tasted rich and complex, with an undercurrent of something ancient and powerful that seemed to ignite her veins as it coursed through her body. Warmth spread from her core to her limbs, the fatigue of the ritual washing away. With it came a strange awareness, a subtle connection she could feel tugging gently at the edges of her consciousness, linking her somehow to Alexander. When she lowered the chalice, she found both vampires watching her intently. It is done, Elisabetta said with satisfaction. The covenant is renewed. The Veduva line continues its sacred duty. Alexander took the empty goblet from Juliet's hands, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact sent a jolt of awareness through her, as if her senses had been heightened. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. "Alive," Juliet replied, surprised by the truth of it. "More alive than I have ever felt." The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of revelations. True to his word, Alexander arranged for Juliet's mother to be transferred to a private medical facility with experimental treatments not available to the general public. Within days, Margaret showed remarkable improvement, her strength returning as the cancer cells mysteriously began to retreat. "Vampire blood in the treatment," Alexander explained when Juliet questioned the miraculous recovery. "Not enough to change her, just enough to boost the effectiveness of the human medicines. An old trick we have perfected over centuries." Juliet continued working at the Moonlit Brew during the day, but her evenings were spent at the Dracul mansion, learning about her heritage from Elisabetta, who grew stronger each day. "Your grandmother was one of the last to be formally trained in the old ways," the vampire queen told her one evening as they sat in the library. "When she left Romania during the communist era, much knowledge was lost. But the blood remembers, child. Your instincts are true." Juliet learned that the Veduva women had been healers for centuries, their blood containing properties that could counteract supernatural poisons and accelerate healing in both humans and vampires. In exchange for this gift, the Dracul clan had protected them through wars, plagues, and persecutions. "We are not the monsters humans believe us to be," Elisabetta explained. "We were once human ourselves, with families and hopes and fears. Immortality changes perspective, not essence." Alexander maintained a careful distance during these sessions, often watching from doorways or adjoining rooms, his expression unreadable. The blood bond between them hummed like a low electrical current, allowing Juliet occasional glimpses of his emotions, his concern for his mother, his curiosity about Juliet herself, and something deeper he seemed determined to suppress. It was during one such evening, as Juliet helped Elisabetta organize ancient texts on Veduva healing methods, that the older vampire fixed her with a penetrating stare. "My son struggles with his nature," she said abruptly. "He believes himself unworthy of connection." Juliet carefully placed a fragile manuscript on the table. "I am not sure what you mean." Elisabetta's laugh was dry and knowing. "You feel the bond between you. It grows stronger each day, does it not?" Heat rose in Juliet's cheeks. It was true, her awareness of Alexander had intensified. Sometimes she could sense his presence in the mansion before seeing him, could feel his hunger when too much time had passed since he had fed, could detect subtle shifts in his mood despite his carefully controlled exterior. "The blood exchange created a connection. You said that would happen?" Juliet replied cautiously. "Not all connections are equal." Elisabetta ran a finger along the edge of an ancient book. "Some are merely practical, a vampire lord and his human ally. Others are more profound. The blood knows what the mind refuses to acknowledge." Before Juliet could respond, the library door opened and Alexander entered, his face tense. "There has been an attack," he announced, addressing his mother but glancing briefly at Juliet. 3 elders from the Western Court were ambushed last night. The hunters are growing bolder." Elisabetta straightened, suddenly every inch the vampire queen despite her still recovering state. "Were there survivors?" "Only one. Mikhail. He is being brought here for questioning." "You believe they will come for us next," Elisabetta stated. Alexander nodded grimly. "You were their first target for a reason, mother. They know you are the keeper of the old ways. And now that you are recovering," his eyes flickered to Juliet, "they will want to eliminate the source of your healing." Juliet's blood ran cold. "You think they will come after me? After my mother?" "I will not allow it," Alexander said, his voice hardening to steel. "The covenant ensures your protection. I have already doubled security at your mother's facility and assigned guards to follow you discreetly." "You have been having me followed?" Juliet stood, anger flaring. "Without telling me?" "To keep you safe." Alexander stepped closer, his eyes intense. The hunters have spies everywhere. They may already know of your involvement. Elisabetta watched them with ancient eyes. The girl should stay here, she declared. Both Viduva women should be brought under our roof until the threat passes. Alexander shook his head. Mother, we cannot simply uproot their lives. My mother is too ill to be moved again, Juliet interrupted. And I have responsibilities, my job, my apartment. Your life is worth more than a coffee shop, Alexander said sharply. Juliet's anger flared brighter. That coffee shop has supported my mother and me through years of medical bills. It is not just a job. It is my lifeline. The tension between them crackled in the air, intensified by the blood bond that allowed each to sense the other's emotions. Alexander's concern and frustration washed over Juliet in waves, while he undoubtedly felt her anger and fear. Elisabetta observed their standoff with something like amusement. The covenant offers a solution, she said calmly. A full blood bond would allow Alexander to protect you from any distance, to sense any threat before it materialized. Mother, Alexander's voice held warning. That is not an option. Because you refuse to consider it, Elisabetta countered. Your outdated notions of monsters and humanity blind you to the truth before you. Juliet looked between them. What exactly is a full blood bond? Alexander turned away, his back rigid with tension. Elisabetta smiled, revealing the tips of her fangs. A joining of equals, she explained. A deeper exchange of blood that creates a permanent connection. It would grant you certain vampiric qualities, enhanced strength, healing, longevity, without full transformation. And it would give Alexander the ability to sense your location and condition no matter the distance between you. It would also bind you to me for decades, Alexander said quietly, still not facing her. It would change you irrevocably, Juliet. I will not ask that of you. But it would keep me safe from these hunters? Alexander turned then, his expression tortured. Yes, but at what cost? You deserve a normal life, not to be tethered to a creature like me. The self-loathing in his voice struck Juliet deeply. Through their existing bond, she caught glimpses of his thoughts, centuries of solitude, of watching humans live and love and die, of believing himself fundamentally separate from such experiences. I think, Juliet said carefully, that ship has already sailed. My life stopped being normal the moment I learned vampires exist and my blood can heal them. She stepped closer to him. And you are not the monster you believe yourself to be, Alexander. His laugh was bitter. You have no idea what I have done in 4 centuries of existence. Then show me. Juliet held his gaze steadily. If this bond would let you into my mind, it works both ways. Does it not? Let me see who you truly are before I decide. Alexander's eyes widened slightly, surprise evident in his expression. You would consider it? I would consider anything that keeps my mother safe, Juliet replied honestly. And yes, me as well. But I need to know exactly who I would be binding myself to. Elisabetta rose from her chair with surprising grace. I will leave you to discuss this matter privately. Remember, my son, that sometimes the greatest courage is allowing yourself to be truly seen. She glided from the room, closing the door softly behind her. In the silence that followed, the blood bond between them pulsed with unspoken emotions, fear, hope, longing, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. That night, in the privacy of the mansion's east wing, Alexander showed Juliet who he truly was. Seated before the fire in his private chambers, he took her hands in his and opened his mind fully to their existing bond, allowing for centuries of memories to flow between them. She saw Alexander as a young nobleman in 1600s Romania, felt his fear and pain during his transformation, witnessed the centuries of bloodshed that followed as he embraced his vampiric nature with the reckless abandon of youth. She experienced his gradual awakening to conscience, the long, painful process of reclaiming his humanity while accepting his immortal nature. She saw the first Viduva healer he had known, a young woman with fierce eyes who had stood before him without fear, offering her blood freely to heal his father. She felt his centuries of protecting the bloodline, watching generations of Viduva women live and die while he remained unchanged. And beneath it all, she felt his profound loneliness, the isolation of immortality, the weight of leadership, the belief that he could never truly connect with another being again. When the flood of memories finally ebbed, Juliet found tears streaming down her face. Alexander watched her cautiously, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Now you know," he said softly. "The monster and the man." "I see no monster," Juliet replied, her voice steady despite her tears. "I see someone who has lived too long with guilt for actions centuries past. Someone who has spent more time protecting others than finding peace for himself." Alexander's laugh was hollow. "You are too generous in your assessment. And you are too harsh in yours." Juliet squeezed his hands. "The bond shows truth, Alexander. I feel what you felt. I see what you see. And what I see is someone worthy of connection, not eternal solitude." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a crack in the armor he had worn for centuries. "If we complete the blood bond," he said carefully, "it cannot be undone. Not until your natural death, which the bond itself would delay significantly. You would be granting me access to your thoughts, your emotions, your very essence. Are you prepared for such intimacy?" The word hung between them, charged with meaning beyond its literal definition. Through their existing connection, Juliet sensed Alexander's carefully controlled desire, his fear of rejection, and beneath it all, a fragile hope he scarcely allowed himself to acknowledge. "I think," Juliet said slowly, "that I have spent my life feeling like I did not quite fit in the world, like I was waiting for something I could not name." She met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps this is what I was waiting for." Alexander's control slipped just slightly, and Juliet felt a wave of emotion wash over her, longing so intense it made her breath catch. "The ritual should be performed at dawn," he said, his voice rough. "The threshold between night and day symbolizes the balance between our natures." "Then we have hours yet," Juliet observed, glancing at the ornate clock on the mantel. Alexander nodded, suddenly uncertain in a way that seemed at odds with his centuries of existence. "You should rest. Consider carefully. Dawn comes soon enough." Juliet stood, but did not move toward the door. Instead, she stepped closer to him, her heart hammering in her chest. "What if I do not want to rest? What if I want to use these hours to better understand what I am committing to?" Alexander went very still, the predator in him recognizing the invitation in her words. "Juliet," he said, her name almost a prayer on his lips. "Do not offer what you might regret." "The only regret I fear," she replied softly, "is not knowing what this connection between us might become." For a moment, neither moved. Then Alexander closed the distance between them, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "I have existed for centuries," he murmured, "and yet I find myself trembling like a youth before you." "Good," Juliet smiled. "Then we are evenly matched in our uncertainty." His laugh was soft and genuine. Then he lowered his head and kissed her. The contact was electric, amplified by their blood connection. Juliet felt the kiss not only on her lips but throughout her entire being, as if the very essence of Alexander was intertwining with hers. His restraint was palpable, the careful control of supernatural strength, the hunger he kept firmly in check. When they finally parted, both breathless despite Alexander's lack of need for air, Juliet saw that his eyes had taken on their vampiric crimson glow. "Forgive me," he said, starting to pull away. "My control." Juliet kept him close. "Do not apologize for showing me who you truly are." She traced the line of his jaw. "All of you, Alexander. That is what I want to know before dawn." His resistance crumbled, centuries of solitude giving way to the simple, human need for connection. With reverent care, Alexander showed Juliet exactly what the bond between them might become, not just physically, but emotionally, the sharing of touch reflecting the deeper sharing of souls that awaited them at dawn. Asterisk as the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, Juliet and Alexander stood in the mansion's ancient ritual chamber. Elisabetta was present as witness, along with 3 elder vampires of the New England court who had arrived during the night after hearing of the hunters' new attacks. The ritual was both simpler and more profound than Juliet had expected. No ornate ceremony, no complex incantations, just the pure intent of 2 beings choosing to bind their essences together. Alexander took the ceremonial dagger and made a clean cut across his palm, deeper than the one used for the initial healing ritual. His blood, dark and rich with centuries of power, welled to the surface. With this blood, I offer protection, loyalty, and truth, he said. His voice steady though Juliet could feel his emotions churning beneath the surface. I bind my existence to yours for as long as your life shall last. Your enemies are my enemies. Your safety is my purpose. Your joy is my pursuit. He extended his bleeding palm to her. Juliet took a deep breath and placed her hand in his, their blood mingling. With my blood, I accept your protection and offer my loyalty in return, she said, the words coming naturally as if her blood truly did remember this ancient covenant. I bind my life to yours freely and with full knowledge. Your purpose is my purpose. Your burdens are my burdens. Your solitude ends with me. The last words were not part of the traditional vow, but they flowed from her heart. Through their joined hands, she felt Alexander's shock, followed by a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. Elisabetta stepped forward, wrapping a length of red silk around their joined hands. Blood to blood, she intoned. Life to life, the covenant is sealed. What immortality has divided, blood has united. The sensation that followed defied description. Juliet felt as if her very essence was expanding beyond the boundaries of her body, reaching out to entwine with Alexander's ancient spirit. His memories became hers, not just the ones he had shown her, but all of them, centuries of existence flowing into her consciousness like a river finding its destined path to the sea. And her memories flowed to him her childhood fears, her mother's illness, her quiet dreams and secret hopes, her growing feelings for him that had blossomed beyond the initial blood connection into something profound and real. When the silk was unwound from their hands, Juliet gasped at what she saw. Their wounds had healed completely, leaving matching silver scars on their palms, permanent marks of their bond. It is done, Elisabetta announced. The Alexander Dracul covenant is renewed and strengthened beyond what has come before. Alexander's eyes met Juliet's, and she could feel his wonder echoing her own. The bond between them hummed with life and power, a connection that transcended the physical world. I feel everything, Juliet whispered. Alexander nodded. As do I. Your thoughts, your emotions, your very heartbeat. His voice was filled with awe. I had not expected such completeness. Elisabetta exchanged knowing glances with the elder vampires. The bond reflects the true connection between the participants, she explained. Its strength is unprecedented because what exists between you transcends the covenant itself. Alexander looked at his mother sharply. You knew this would happen. Elisabetta smiled. I suspected. The blood always knows what the heart denies, my son. She turned to address the elders. Prepare the defenses. The hunters will sense this new power. They will come soon. As the others departed to carry out her orders, Alexander kept Juliet's hand firmly in his. Through their new bond, she could feel his protective instincts surging, along with something deeper that made her heart race. I will keep you safe, he promised. The words unnecessary with the bond allowing her to feel the depth of his commitment. I know, Juliet replied simply. And I will keep you human. Alexander's surprise rippled through their connection. Human? I have not been human for centuries. Juliet smiled, touching his face gently. Your body may be immortal, but your soul remains human, Alexander. That is what the hunters fail to understand about your kind. That is what you yourself have forgotten. Through their bond, she felt his resistance to this idea, the centuries of believing himself separate from humanity, a creature apart. But she also felt the longing beneath it, the desire to belong, to connect, to love and be loved without the burden of monstrosity. Perhaps, he conceded, with you to remind me. The hunters came 3 nights later, during a violent thunderstorm that rattled the windows of the mansion. Juliet was with her mother in the private medical facility when she felt Alexander's alarm surge through their bond. "They are here," she told Margaret, who was sitting up in bed, her strength returning more each day. "The hunters Alexander warned us about." Margaret reached for her hand. "You must go to him. The bond demands it." Juliet hesitated. "I cannot leave you unprotected." "I am not unprotected." Margaret nodded toward the door where 2 of Alexander's security teams stood guard. "Go. Your place is at his side now." Through the bond, Juliet felt Alexander's mixture of fierce determination and concern for her. "Stay where you are," his thoughts reached her clearly. "You are safer away from the mansion." "I will not hide while you fight," she responded, still marveling at this new ability to communicate across distance. "The covenant makes us partners, not master and ward." His frustration flickered through their connection, but beneath it was reluctant acceptance. He knew, as she did, that their bond made them stronger together than apart. Juliet kissed her mother's forehead and hurried out to the waiting car Alexander had assigned for her use. As the driver sped through the rain-soaked streets toward Beacon Hill, Juliet focused on their bond, sending Alexander her strength and determination. When they arrived at the mansion, she could see signs of battle already: broken windows, scorch marks on the elegant facade. Gunshots echoed from within. "Miss, I cannot allow you to enter," the driver protested as she reached for the door handle. "Master Dracul's orders are superseded by our bond," Juliet finished firmly. Before he could stop her, she was out of the car and running toward the entrance, the rain soaking her instantly. Inside, chaos reigned. Furniture lay overturned, and the scent of blood, both human and vampire, hung heavy in the air. Juliet followed the pull of the bond, moving deeper into the mansion toward the library, where Alexander's presence burned brightly in her mind. She found him surrounded by 4 attackers, humans armed with weapons that gleamed with an unnatural blue light. Even as she watched, one of them slashed at Alexander with a blade that left a smoking wound across his arm. Unlike a normal injury that would heal instantly, this one remained open, black veins spreading from the cut. The same poison, she realized, the one that had nearly killed Elisabetta. Alexander fought with supernatural speed and strength, but Juliet could feel his pain through their bond, could sense that the poison was already affecting him. The hunters had come prepared. Without hesitation, Juliet stepped into the room. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice carrying unexpected authority. The hunters turned toward her, momentarily distracted. Alexander used the opportunity to disarm one, sending him crashing into a bookcase. "Viduva!" One of the hunters spat, recognizing something in her stance or perhaps sensing the bond. "Blood traitor." "I am a healer," Juliet corrected, standing her ground despite her racing heart. "As my mother before me and her mother before her. We heal all who need healing, human and vampire alike." "They are abominations," the hunter snarled, raising his poisoned blade. "And those who aid them share their guilt." Alexander moved with blinding speed, placing himself between Juliet and the hunter. "You will not touch her," he growled, his voice inhuman with rage. Juliet placed her hand on Alexander's back, feeling the wound's poison spreading through his system. Through their bond, she sent him not just strength but knowledge, ancient healing techniques that her blood remembered even if her mind did not. Power flowed between them, amplified by their connection. Alexander straightened, the black veins receding slightly from his wound. "What is this?" one of the hunters demanded, backing away. "What are you doing to him?" "Showing you what you have forgotten," Juliet said, stepping beside Alexander now, their hands joining. "The covenant between our kinds was never meant to create division, but balance. Vampires protected healers from those who feared our abilities. Healers helped vampires maintain their humanity." The hunter's expression hardened. "Pretty words to justify abomination." "Not words," Alexander said, his voice stronger now as their combined power flowed through him. "Truth." We were human once, as were you. We remember what you have forgotten, that existence is not simply light and dark, but infinite shades between. The standoff might have continued, but at that moment Elisabetta appeared in the doorway, flanked by elder vampires. Her recovery complete, she radiated ancient power that made even the hardened hunters pause. "You were foolish to come here," she said, her voice calm but carrying deadly promise. "Especially now that the covenant has been renewed in its strongest form." The hunters exchanged glances, clearly reassessing their odds. What had perhaps seemed a manageable target, a recovering vampire queen and her son, now presented a united front of ancient power. "This is not over," their leader warned, backing toward a shattered window. "Others will come, and they will find the same reception," Elisabetta replied. "For centuries we have maintained the balance. We will continue to do so." The hunters retreated, disappearing into the stormy night. Alexander sagged slightly against Juliet, the poison still working through his system despite their combined effort to halt its progress. "We need to treat him properly," Juliet said to Elisabetta. "The wound is like yours was." Elisabetta nodded, her eyes on their joined hands where the matching silver scars gleamed. "But unlike when I was poisoned, he has you bonded fully, not merely allied. Your blood now carries part of his immortality. His carries part of your healing ability." "What does that mean?" Juliet asked, supporting Alexander as they moved toward the ritual chamber. Elisabetta's smile held ancient wisdom. "It means, daughter of Viduva, that together you have created something new. Something neither the oldest vampire nor the most skilled healer has seen before." In the ritual chamber, Juliet helped Alexander to the stone altar at its center. The poison had spread further, black veins now visible across his chest and creeping toward his heart. "What do I do?" she asked urgently, feeling his pain through their bond. "Trust your blood," Elisabetta advised. "It remembers." Juliet closed her eyes, focusing on their connection. Through it, she could feel not just Alexander's current state but the very essence of him, the accumulated knowledge of centuries, the ancient magic that sustained his immortal existence. And within her own blood, she sensed answering power, the healing abilities passed down through generations of Viduva women. Without hesitation, she took the ritual dagger and sliced her palm along their bond scar. She placed her bleeding hand directly over Alexander's wound, their blood mingling once more. "Blood to blood," she whispered, the ancient words coming to her instinctively. "Life to life. What has been divided is united. What has been poisoned is purified." The effect was immediate and visible. Where their blood met, the black veins began to recede, replaced by a soft silver glow that spread outward. Alexander gasped, his back arching as healing energy coursed through him. Through their bond, Juliet felt the moment the poison was neutralized, felt Alexander's relief and wonder, followed by a surge of emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. When she finally removed her hand, his wound had healed completely, leaving only a faint silver mark that matched the one on his palm, a second covenant mark to pair with the first. Alexander sat up, staring at the healed wound in amazement. "How did you know what to do?" "I did not," Juliet admitted. "I just felt it, through our connection." Elisabetta watched them with satisfaction. The true power of the covenant revealed at last. Not merely protection for service, but a true melding of abilities. She approached them, placing her hands on their shoulders. "What exists between you transcends the ancient agreement. It has become something new, something that may finally bridge the worlds of vampire and human as was always intended." Alexander looked at Juliet with wonder. Through their bond, she felt his realization that in seeking merely to protect her, he had found something he had believed forever beyond his reach. Partnership, acceptance, love without condition or reservation. "The hunters will return," he said quietly, "with greater numbers and deadlier weapons. And we will be waiting," Juliet replied, her hand finding his. Together. 1 year later, The Moonlit Brew had undergone a transformation as profound as its owners. Now open exclusively during evening hours, it had become a neutral meeting ground for vampires and humans alike, a place where ancient enemies could sit at neighboring tables, where blood-infused coffee was served alongside regular brews, where the covenant between species was honored in practice rather than just ancient text. Juliet moved among the tables, her heightened senses, a gift of the blood bond, allowing her to differentiate vampire from human with a glance. Her mother, fully recovered and now aware of her family's true heritage, handled the specialty drinks behind the counter, adding drops of healing herbs to vampire beverages with practiced ease. "Your little experiment continues to thrive," Elisabetta observed, seated regally in a corner booth where she held informal court several nights a week. "Even the most skeptical elders have begun to see its value." "Neutrality has its advantages," Alexander replied, his eyes following Juliet's movements through the cafe. Through their bond, he could feel her contentment, her sense of purpose fulfilled. The hunters had indeed returned in the months following their first attack, but each time they found a more united front awaiting them. Slowly, tentatively, a fragile truce had begun to form, not with all hunters, but with those wise enough to recognize that extermination was not the answer. The cafe had become the centerpiece of this new understanding. Here, under the protection of the Dracul covenant, supernatural beings and humans could interact without fear, could begin to see each other as something more than predator and prey. Juliet approached their table, sliding into the seat beside Alexander. He immediately took her hand, their matching bond scars touching, sending a pleasant warmth through their connection. "Margaret tells me we have 3 new vampires visiting from the Western Court tonight," Alexander said. "Curious about our arrangement here." Juliet nodded. "I seated them near the window. They seem younger, more adaptable to the idea of coexistence." Elisabetta's smile was approving. The old must eventually give way to the new, even in immortal society. She rose gracefully. "I will greet them. It is important they understand this initiative has the full support of the Eastern Court." As she glided away, Alexander turned to Juliet, his expression softening. Through their bond, she felt the depth of his emotion, something that still amazed him after centuries of believing himself incapable of such feeling. "You have changed everything," he said quietly. "Not just for me, but for all of us." Juliet squeezed his hand. "We changed it together. The covenant was always meant to be a partnership, not a transaction." She smiled, feeling his contentment echo her own through their connection. Besides, immortality would be terribly boring without decent coffee. Alexander laughed, a sound that still surprised those who had known him before Juliet. "And I would be lost without you to remind me of my humanity." Outside, rain began to fall, not unlike the night they had first met. Inside the Moonlit Brew, vampire and human sat side by side, their ancient divisions slowly healing under the watchful eyes of those who understood that true balance came not from separation but from union. And at the center of it all, a vampire who had lived for centuries and a barista who had saved his mother from a cruel fate continued to discover that their bond, born of ancient covenant, but sustained by something far more powerful, had created not just healing, but hope for 2 worlds that had forgotten they were always meant to coexist. Through their shared blood, they had each found what they truly needed. For Alexander, a connection to humanity he had believed forever lost. For Juliet, a purpose that fulfilled the ancient calling in her blood. Together, they embodied the truth that had been forgotten over centuries of fear and prejudice, that monsters were not defined by their nature, but by their choices, and that love could indeed bridge the gap between mortal and immortal. The covenant had been renewed, but it was their love that had transformed it into something new, a testament to the power of connection across the boundaries of life and death, of mortality and eternity, of past and future. And as Alexander drew Juliet closer, their bond humming with shared emotion, both knew with absolute certainty that this was merely the beginning of their eternal story.